Simple domain lore! Yes! Yes! Yes, thank you, Gege. Yes, thank you. I've been asking for character interactions and world building for so long. Jujutsu Kaisen 269 just dropped. Guys, we can talk about it. Let's go, filler Kaisen. As we know, the end of Jujutsu Kaisen is approaching, and this is the third to last chapter, so let's see what Gege has in store for us, what he cooked. Let's start with a chapter recap as always. The chapter starts with Mei talking to some random hag, and I know what you guys are thinking, but do not worry, this will be irrelevant later. After opening the chapter with something that nobody ever asked for, Maki then turns into a tsundere and berates Yuta. Now we do find, and I will mention this later in the chapter, that everyone else also begins berating Yuta, even though he basically carried all of Shinjuku after Gojo on his back. But Maki is the one character who actually has the right to do it. It is the typical trope of, I'm mad at you because I care so much about you. But the fact that everyone else was glaring at Yuta and being like, dude, you know, everything could have gone better. What the fuck? Again, it's fine. We'll talk about all of that in a sec. And then Megumi feels the toll of Unlimited Void as he kind of stumbles and is like, oh man, is this what Unlimited Void feels like? I'm feeling a little foggy. Yeah? You're feeling foggy, Megumi? That's what Unlimited Void has done. And then Kusakabe comes in with the, you know what? Everything could have been resolved if we had just killed Yuji. You are missing the point, my good sir. The whole reason the story happened is because people were like, no, you know what, we have to kill Yuji. They send Yuji to go fight the special grade. That is the only reason Sukuna made the Enchain binding vow. That is the reason that the story took place. But you know who didn't want to execute Yuji? Gojo, because he wanted to change Jujutsu Society. So for all of you Kusakabe fans, you guys need to lecture him a little bit because I think he's missing the point of literally everything that just fucking happened. And remember, the last chapter ended with everybody going to make sure that Yuta is okay, but don't worry guys, Yuta is in fact fine. Rika is perhaps the most actually OP thing in the entire series. She was managing to keep his old body alive while his brain was in Gojo's body. And the reason he fell asleep, we find out, is because he used domain expansion. Now this actually makes sense, because Kenjaku has had his technique for so fucking long, he knew how to separate the curse techniques, he knew how to make some barrier techniques within the brain, but Yuta did not know how to do this, he did not prepare for this, so when he did open his domain, boom, technique cancelled. So thank you for that explanation, Gege, but then we've got some more explanations, because Maki turns into a Jujutsu Kaisen reader and starts explaining to the group what could have gone better. That is her first thought. We are coming off an act of terrorism by Sukuna. No time to mourn. Maki has to be like, you know what, we could have used the Executioner Sword with Todo's Vibra Slap, we could have used Curse Speech, but don't worry guys, narrator gives us more Curse Speech info. This part where the narrator was explaining Curse Speech actually made no sense to me, because obviously Inumaki would have been killed by the feedback had he used Curse Speech against the full power Sukuna. Nobody in their right mind would have thought that the sole plan that would have worked is Curse Speech. We did not need this exposition. But Gege makes a really big brain move, because then Todo uses his enormous brain to refute every single one of Maki's plans, and Gege self-inserts himself as Todo to explain why these plans wouldn't work. Now, if we were following the series and reading it as intended, we would have known that everything that Todo is refuting was already given to us in prior chapters. So the reason it was explained is because... And then we also find out that our favorite lawyer is alive. Higuruma is not dead, even though it very much seemed that way. I saw a lot of people angry about this. I saw a lot of people angry about Kusakabe being alive. To be honest, I never expected Kusakabe to actually be dead. But Higuruma was written in a way, the way the cliffhangers were suggested really made it seem like he was done. He was a 2-month-old sorcerer who wasn't even killed by Sukuna, basically on a whim. And then we get information that Miguel and LaRue could have literally changed the entire tide of the battle by arriving earlier, and for some reason people are mad at Yuta for this. Like I said earlier, Yuta's plans are what made people actually be able to defeat Sukuna. And we knew this about Miguel and LaRue already because their performance in the Sukuna fight was actually top tier. And then of course we get some new information about the Queen of Curses because Rika is literally the Fortnite battle bus. You didn't know that she could do this before, but in fact, she kept everyone in her big old mouth floating above the battlefield, ready for everyone to just take flight as soon as Gojo lost. Did Sukuna see Rika? Probably not, because he didn't fucking do anything. How far were they? I don't know, but I mean, it's cool that she can do that, I guess. Then we see some self-glaze going on where Uiui proclaims himself the GOAT and says that he's the MVP of the fight, which is 100% true. Miwa apologizes for being useless, which I actually don't even think is the case because she saves Maki, and then Momo has the audacity to show herself on fucking screen. And then we get an incredible lore dump where Mei explains how Simple Domain has been monopolized for the longest time and how many sorcerers are not actually able to use Simple Domain. Okay. Thank you for that. It like literally almost half the chapter is this explanation of something that we've never heard of before. So what really ends up happening is Gege makes a random subplot plus continues building the world with 3 chapters remaining. Like, did we really need an explanation as to why people knew Simple Domain, as to why people were able to survive the domain expansions? I have not seen a single person wonder, wait, why can everyone use Simple Domain? Isn't that a hidden technique? I literally never. And then the chapter ends with Mei killing the Walt Disney, the monopolizer of the JJK world. That was pretty dope. Mei does like a little, haha, look at me, I'm so cute, and boom, 2 chapters to go. Now, normally I like to talk about each character individually and the implications that they present within the chapter, but I think that this time the chapter was so non-cohesive character-wise that we can just talk about the chapter as a whole. So to start, I'd like to say that this chapter was literally filler, or a battle recap. Had this chapter not existed, nothing in the story would have changed whatsoever. In fact, I would go so far as to say that this chapter existing ruined parts of the story. And we'll get to that in a sec. I'm specifically talking about Yujo off the top of my mind, but just put a pin in that for one moment. Because the next thing I want to talk about is that world building at the end of the manga makes no sense. I know that people wanted character interactions. I know that people wanted world building, but you took the cast and you somehow made them so lifeless from the characterization that they did have throughout the entirety of the manga. After fighting and beating the biggest calamity in Jujutsu history, we do not get a chapter of mourning. We do not get a chapter of showing people's characterization and how they would deal with the situation after. We get this thinly veiled attempt at building more lore about something that no one's ever asked for. What about the culling game? This is still going on. You have 2 chapters left, and I'm not gonna sit here and say this chapter ruined everything, because again, there's 2 chapters left, but there is just no chance that everything can be wrapped up within 2 chapters. It's time to accept this. And then in this chapter and some previous ones, we see that Yuji actually showed more concern and compassion for Sukuna than he did for Gojo, because again, this wasn't mentioned. But I did put an asterisk here, because my read is that the next chapter will be heavily Gojo focused. As I'm sure a lot of you already know by now, there is a literal panel in the middle of the chapter showing the time being 221, which is the exact chapter that Gojo initially comes back from the prison realm. Does that mean anything? Who fucking knows? If Gojo actually comes back from the dead at this point, as Gojo's literal biggest hoper and literal Satoru Gojo IRL, I don't know what I would say. I mean, something has to be done about that on video. So while we technically have time for a proper wrap-up, this chapter just felt super odd. It felt completely lifeless of the characters that we've grown to know and love. It felt like Gege had to insert himself and be like, this is why you should not tell me that I'm a bad writer. This is why I'm going to now plug all these plot holes. That is just not how you do it. That is not how you do it at the end of the manga. And because Higuruma is alive, it's worth mentioning that Sukuna only really killed Gojo, Kashimo, and Choso, and 2 of those people were willing to die. One of them was going to die no matter what if he fought Sukuna. So really, Sukuna, king of frauds indeed. And obviously I'm being a little facetious when I say this, because Sukuna's power is basically boundless in JJK, but it's so strange that really only like 3-4 people died in the series. That is not what we were expecting from Jujutsu Kaisen, and certainly not what I was expecting from the final fight with Sukuna. And finally, like I said earlier in the slide, the Yuta Gojo plot really went nowhere. I know that a lot of people say, well, it shows us that Gojo was the strongest because he's Gojo, not the other way around. That was never the point. That was never the question that Geto was actually asking, in my opinion. But the issue with Yuta coming back in Gojo's body is that while it's an interesting twist and interesting writing, you need to have some sort of consequence if you are going to write a monster character, someone who wants to take the burdens of Gojo on. That did not happen this chapter. He literally just snapped back to his body, and they are treating him like Yuta again, not like Gojo. And unfortunately, Gege did get sick right after this reveal, but I mean, the way it ended just makes me say, okay, this plot point really went nowhere. But if you have different opinions about any of this, please let me know in the comments down below. Let's get to the conclusion of 269 and what I think about the chapter as a whole. I am a huge Jujutsu Kaisen fan. I very much enjoyed this series throughout. But this is the first time in a long time that I felt the chapter was actively bad. In fact, and I've said this before, I never consumed Jujutsu Kaisen content on YouTube, but this time I had to, because when I read the leaks, when I read the chapter, I had to see what other people were saying. I am dumbfounded by how many people are accepting this chapter as another piece of Gege art. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Critiquing something does not forbid you from also liking it. But how can you justify so many of these writing decisions? This was a filler chapter. This ruined characterization. Yuta Gojo plot went nowhere. What is going on? I've seen people say the simple domain lore was just so good because it provided more insight into the Jujutsu world. Yeah, maybe if it was 100 fucking chapters ago, there are 2 left. Even if the next 2 chapters are the most important in the entire series, you do not need this weird filler chapter in between. But regardless, we are probably / hopefully getting a Gojo chapter next. I mean, I can really only hope for this. After everything and looking retrospectively at the series, I think that Gojo was actually the best written character. But in regard to 269, the entire cast characterization was thrown out the window. But the 3 Simple Domain fans were eating good today. I hope you guys enjoyed that. And a couple other things just to finish this video off. The Heian era, guaranteed bums. Because if they all fucking lost to Sukuna, and we've got Tokyo Jujutsu High plus Kyoto Jujutsu High plus Gojo beating Sukuna, I mean, goddamn. Heian era, not my vibe. Jujutsu Kaisen 2? Probably not. Honestly, in this lore dump, Gege even set up like a war between the clans potentially, which could lead to JJK Shippuden, but I just think he's so done. He's gotta be done. But regardless, consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed. Please let me know what you thought about this chapter. Am I alone in my thinking about all of this? Am I actually being too critical? I love JJK. All I can say is we have 2 chapters of JJK left. Maybe it's gonna be greater than everyone imagined. I mean, I'm completely open to that possibility, but please leave in the comments down below any other suggestions for future game, series, real life things to cover. And because JJK is ending, go check out some other stuff on the channel too. Who knows, maybe you'll like it more than the JJK stuff. Honestly, in my opinion, it's better. Until next time, you are looking so incredibly beautiful. I'm trying to riz you up through the screen right now. Am I succeeding? I hope so. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.